Right. So I am joined here today by Professor now David Luke, right? Professor David Luke. And he is going to be one of my special guests on the Oracle Dream Retreat this May, where we will be visiting some of the most important oracle sites and dream oracle sites and healing dream sites of ancient Greece. And I know, David, you're doing a study into lucid dreaming, and I actually don't know anything about it yet. So I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about your study, your work.
I mean, you haven't dreamt about it. I don't know so much about it either, too much at this point, but it's in development, and that is there've been a lot of research since the 1960s into dream precognition, dreaming the future, or oracle dreaming, if you like. But these pretty much all used just kind of normal dreamers, people who just like dreaming and like remembering their dreams. And no one specifically looked at people who have lucid dreams or can lucid dream at will. So we're kind of doing that. I'm revisiting some research I did decades ago and revamping it and going to enlist lucid dreamers, which we think will be better at dream recall, better at setting intentions, better perhaps at then successfully accessing the future through their dreams. Um, so that's the basic plan. It's an experimental setup. People are going to sleep at home or wherever they happen to be sleeping. We don't have to make them sleep at home.
Can be your guinea pigs.
100%. I hope so. And yeah, the process is they do a number of trials where they have a future target they have to try and dream. Which will be just like a 1 minute video clip, and then they'll get to do a kind of selection process where they look at their dream mentation and they compare it to these four video clips and they try and say which one is most like. And then one of them is chosen at random in true scientific fashion to be the future target. So it's impossible to cheat. If people do well, it can only be by some weird quirk of probability, or they're actually getting information from the future. And yeah, I don't believe that. If that's not the case, then probability is a god, right? So.
So what do you think about how it may be possible for us to dream the future? What do you think the mechanisms are, if you think what you know about them at
I
all?
mean, mechanisms, I don't know. It's like asking, what is the nature of consciousness, I think. We still don't have a decent theory on or any theories particularly that are comprehensive on the nature of consciousness. There is literally a recent survey suggested there are about 200 major competing theories for the nature of consciousness, right? So nobody's got a clue and nobody's in agreement. And so, things like precognition have some implications for those theories of consciousness, but there aren't, not many of those theories particularly speak to psychic abilities. But I think it has to be included in the explanation. So just flipping that question the other way around, I think working and kind of discovering like what processes are at work in these kind of sojourns out of time and space will help us better understand the nature of consciousness. And then we may be able to better develop theories to help us explain why we have these extraordinary time slips or seemingly extraordinary time slips. But currently there are no direct violations of the laws of physics, particularly because according to the laws of physics, the equations of physics, time goes backwards and forwards anyway, and it's only like ruled out that it goes backwards because of our subjective experience. That's not how we ordinarily perceive time usually. Um, and yet, in all the kind of quadratic equations within physics where time is included, there is an advanced and a retarded solution, which means time goes both ways. And also, like, if you listen to the kind of some of the leading theorists on the nature of time, like our whole subjective experience of time is apparently just an illusion. And, the kind of leading competing theory on the nature of time is the block universe theory, that basically everything happened all at once and is happening all at once and will happening all at once. So yeah, what do we know? I don't know much.
I think that philosophy and that idea about time, consciousness, and dreaming are far more related to one another than they seem to be given credit for in modern scientific inquiry, because I cannot understand why people that are really interested in the science of consciousness aren't exploring dreams more passionately, because for me it's like the most amazing thing that the human mind is capable of, and it has all of the components of the weirdness of time and the weirdness of the imagination. But I guess it's a difficult thing to study in a scientific environment, because most people don't sleep very well in sleep labs, and it's a hard experiment for people to do at home on their own. But not on an oracle dream retreat. It's a perfect environment. So I was saying to you, like the places we're going to the Oracle of Amphiarios, which is specifically a dream oracle related to a divinized seer who prophesied his own death during the Seven Against Thebes and was swallowed up in the earth on the kind of action of Zeus. And then he, on the actual place where the earth apparently swallowed him up, that's where they built this sanctuary where people could go and have these oracular dreams. And you can still sleep on the actual benches that were either end of a stoa where the ancient pilgrims would have slept, and they would make an offering into the well. So it's often talked about how you had to make like a donation to Amphiarios. And so obviously the priests were like pocketing some of this kind of payment as well. But one of the interesting things, I think Pausanias writes about how there's a picture that's no longer there, a painting on the wall that shows this idea about the false and true dreams, and how you have to I'd be able to identify the true dream. So what do you think, about that story of like the dreams that come through the gates of horn and the dreams that come through the gates of ivory? And it's based on wordplay, because the word for ivory is close to the word for deceit, and the word for horn is close to the word for truth. So I was reading this paper recently about, you do a lot of work in psychedelic science, about how you have to kind of test the epiphanies that you receive in psychedelic experiences. And I think the same can be said of dreams. Like very often we receive epiphanies in dreams. And for the ancients, I think they had a system of, or there seems to be a system of like working out the nature of a dream. And it's based on this false and truehood in ancient Greek dream interpretation. But I think there's this idea that you get some dreams and they're just definitely audiences with a god. You get some dreams that are like a trick, and you get some dreams that are just kind of humdrum, boring stuff, or that they need to be interpreted by a skilled interpreter. Do you have the same kind of thing with psychedelics, do you think?
Well, not formally. Maybe indigenous shamans or practitioners maybe do that, but not within the kind of psychedelic science. It's kind of like just here be dragons and take care. And, if you have any big epiphanies or insights whilst you're on your fantastic psychedelic retreat in Peru or whatever, don't kind of act upon any of it immediately. Like, have a little cooling off period before you come home and quit your job and sell your house and leave your life partner, right? So that's kind of usually the advice that's gone, and just particularly around kind of metaphysical shifts as well. Just, take your time, suck it and see. Don't take everything at face value immediately, at least, right? So that's usually the kind of received wisdom around these things. But whether or not there's ways of discerning which ones are which, that's a little, yeah, it's more of a curious question. I think, Jung talked about like big dreams, didn't he? There are those ones which do seem to have a very cosmic nature to them. They have a sense of profundity and depth. They can be kind of quite vivid. I mean, certainly the ones I've had, which have been the most spectacular, usually wake me up in a kind of startled manner. I had one the other day, actually. It was quite interesting, but I'm not going to go into that. But I kind of woke up and knocked over the lamp and woke up my girlfriend at the same time. And then it kind of turned out to be pretty precognitive the next day. So, yeah, I think there's maybe something in the notion that there is particular flavors to certain dreams. Um, but yet at the same time, I can recall somewhat fairly. No, actually, I also woke up from that one. But there are other dreams which, like on the surface of it, seem quite mundane but less cosmic, which may still kind of carry precognitive content. So I think it's hard to discern, really. It's a bit like, for me, I think at least, driving forward looking in the rear view mirror. And it's only with hindsight, it's once you've come through the other side and you've seen the experience which matches the dream that you go, oh, right, so that was precognitive, or appears precognitive.
You think
So
there's an argument as well for like almost the future gestates in dream space and actually becomes real in our waking reality? Because I feel like, if you look at ancient dream interpretation, which is why I'm so interested in precognitive dreaming, because in ancient dream interpretation, it's just totally obsessed with predicting the future. It's not about a dreamer's individual personality or experience, or it's always about predicting the future, which, the ancients do seem to be preoccupied with all kinds of oracular divinatory activities and arts. And it's so weird. Why did we lose contact with that? Like, why do we not think that we can read the signs of the world now, or the signs of our dreams, to get some inkling about the future? Because actually it's quite logical that in dream space, because we're calibrating and working out our place in space and time, that we are making sense and we are making predictions, because it is also part of the evolutionary function of dreams to work out how to survive the future. And we do that by making predictions about what that future might be. So why do you think we as a culture, because not all cultures have forgotten the importance of dreams, but why do you think we've forgotten that dreams are actually very useful in predicting the future?
yeah, you're completely right there. There are many other cultures around the world, um, more kind of traditional animist, indigenous cultures and so on, which really do value dreams and other altered states. And The anthropologist of dreams, Charles Laughlin, put forward this notion of monophasic and polyphasic cultures. So monophasic cultures only value one state of consciousness, the waking, alert, sober state, with occasional dispensations, perhaps for coffee to make you work harder, and Friday night you can have a few beers. Whereas these other cultures are polyphasic. They value as much, or if not more, these alternate states of consciousness for the insights they can give us. And I think the reason we went down this kind of monophasic route is partly to do with religion, and partly to do with science. We started off with religion initially, in that through kind of uh, monotheistic cultures, particularly Christianity, these kinds of powers were demonized, the work of the devil, right? Paranormal feats, even though they were kind of reported in the Bible, became like associated with, witchcraft and the devil and so on. And then, of course, then science kind of finished off where the church left off, and kind of made these things kind of heretical in a different way. They became woo, they became subjective, became beyond the realms of science. Subjective experience itself was denigrated for about the best part of the last 100 years of psychology. And anything that wasn't in the ordinary state of consciousness was labeled hallucination, and still has that baggage, right? So we've gone down a particular route with the kind of in the so-called developed world, and yet we're missing a trick, particularly when you remember, the origins of Western medicine come from the dream healing tradition in itself, right?
Mm. How do you think that's heading then as well, if you take on this added layer of technology and AI and you're kind of outsourcing consciousness all the time? Because so much of memory, so much of dreaming is to do with memory. And I do think it's like such a rich seam of scientific inquiry into memory. I'm really surprised that more people aren't doing those kinds of studies, because dreaming is so interesting with regards to dementia and how people experience dementia. People who have dementia often in their dreams might speak, and they're speaking completely normally and they're having normal dreams. They're so fascinating with regards to memory function. What do you think the result of this over reliance on technology is going to have on the state of dreaming in the future?
That's a really good question, and it's hard to say. I haven't really given it any thought other than the last 3 seconds. But we do know that there are kind of profound cognitive changes going on with our reliance on technology, on AI, social media, and just accessibility of everything on the internet and on our screens, which is giving us a change in our cognitive function, right? We're not necessarily required to depend upon our memory quite as much as we were. We've all but lost the kind of oral storytelling traditions whereby people would memorize huge tracts of information. The entire kind of cosmology and history of a whole culture may be remembered by individuals through storytelling. So all of that's kind of is getting lost and changing. And I'd be interested to see how that is affecting dream content and dreaming ability and the ability to recall dreams as well. But I could only kind of speculate.
Is a proper digital detox, like try as much as possible to get people away from their phones, and because it's almost become an extension of our sense of self. It's such a peculiar phenomena, really, like how invested we are in this device. And there's even the phenomena of what's being called digital dementia now as well, where young people use devices so much that they're having the same kind of like brain fog and inability to remember things as people that have dementia. So I think it is like hugely influencing dreams. I am a bit conspiracy theory about 5G and all that sort of stuff as well, on Wi-Fi, because I do find that those places that you go to where there's absolutely no reception, like the Black Mountains in Wales is amazing. No reception, no phone reception, no nothing. Like the difference in the clarity of the dreaming is really interesting. And it does seem that we're in this kind of like foggy, in terms of like signals and frequencies, we're in this increasingly densely irradiated space. And the kinds of processes that are going on in our brains when we dream are so subtle that I do think they could potentially be influenced by that sort of thing. What do you reckon about that, Dave?
I mean, yeah, why not? I mean, I did kind of collaborate on a paper years ago on, the potential influences of electromagnetic fields on the pineal gland and then the possible links to dreaming and psychic abilities. Yeah, there's so little research on that, but we are seemingly acutely sensitive even to really weak electromagnetic fields like the geomagnetic field, which is minuscule. Birds navigate by it, right? We still have that ability, and we are steeped in all kinds of pollution across the whole spectrum, from electromagnetic radiation, but through to light pollution as well. Like our body clocks are completely disorientated from artificial lights. It's almost impossible to see the full night sky as our ancestors did anymore. Our kind of circadian rhythms are all shot to pieces because we don't follow natural rhythms. The list goes on, doesn't it? And so the more we can detox from all of that, if we can, if that's even possible, then the better that is for tapping into our kind of natural rhythms and cycles that have evolved over the previous several million years, prior to becoming hyper-technologized agriculturalists, right?
Well, I guess like I was watching a documentary recently about the invention of the printing press. I know how to enjoy myself, and it's that caused like proper uproar at the time and changed the way people saw the world and could communicate, and seemed to be like the end times to a lot of like social commenters. So I do think it's useful to look back at history and see what kinds of shifts we were experiencing then, because it's probably the biggest shift we've had in consciousness, I would say, as a human race in recent history. It was like a massive change in the way that we could access information, and caused like the spread of misinformation and propaganda in a way that like had never been seen before. So I do think there are probably some parallels there. But I mean, one of the things that I find works most effectively for encouraging lucid dreaming are the old school arts, drawing, writing, singing, all of those things that human beings are just naturally supposed to do are really, really useful. And it's also, in a way, I suppose, going back to things of childhood, and children often do have very vivid lucid dreams because they're so good at imaginative play, and they spend so much time imagining and playing and not being too sure of the world, like still having that sense of mystery and wonder.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, I wonder what you make of these new technological gadgets then kind of help induce lucid dreaming, of which I'm yet to see anything decent hit the market, although there's always a lot of kind of media exposure about these things.
Well, people are using a lot of AI generating like programs to create art of their dreams. And I personally, I don't really like the aesthetic of AI at the moment. I think it's a bit ugly. And I'm sure it can get like super realistic and be different. But I was watching, Lena the other day. She did this wonderful interview with my friend Ike Baker, and she was talking about how the whole point of art is that the artist is delighted by it and loves it. And how can you love it if you're just typing in some words? And there is no channeling. There's no like love or sense of adoration or joy in it. And I think that that's what art is there for, and that's why we do it, to express that joy or to find that joy. So I kind of think it's weird that anyone is extracting joy out of it. It's still got that very uncanny valley quality to it at the moment. And I sort of think I'd rather see someone's crap drawing, because a lot of people use AI because they think they're rubbish at art. But I think I'd rather see someone's crap drawing of a dream than an AI generated weird uncanny valley version of it, no matter how detailed and sort of weirdly perfect it looks.
Yeah, I also agree. I seem to agree with you on everything. But I was actually speaking more about the gadgets that people supposedly have access to induce lucid dreams. So
Like
like
the
these eye masks and brain mapping, biofeedback devices, that make all these kind of wild claims about enhancing your lucid dreaming abilities. I mean, I'm sure they may help to some extent, but I'm more of an old school analog kind of train yourself to lucid dream, because why kind of make your muscles more flaccid by relying on a gadget to do that? But
indeed. Well, I did see there was something, I think it was called an Aladdin Dreamer. Did you see that one? That was based on that research that Ursula Voss did, which was about pulsing a certain frequency into the frontal cortex to like activate the frontal cortex. And I think they were doing like a crowdfunding or something, and nothing. I don't think anything came of it.
no,
But
there's a lot of those.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I agree, but I kind of think any route which enables someone to have a lucid dream for the first time is going to be pretty good, because it's a bit like um, you just don't know it until you have it, I suppose, and it's a really difficult thing to describe. So and it's a very different experience for everyone as well in some ways. So I sort of think if you have that moment of awareness in a dream, some kind of gates open up so that it's more likely that you're going to have lucid dreaming episodes in the future as well. But I do think you can absolutely train yourself to have lucid dreams, but it's still a little bit unreliable. They can come spontaneously with nothing at all, or you could work for months diligently and then start to have lucid dreams. So it is a difficult thing to guarantee people, I suppose. What are
Yeah,
your
I mean,
tried and true lucid dreaming techniques then, Dave?
just reality testing, really, regular reality testing, like trying to enhance your awareness and attention. Obviously, recording your dreams, 100%. I mean, you've got to start recording your dreams first before you can engage with them intentionally, I think. Um, there would be some of the basic ones, and yeah, just being diligent, training yourself, reviewing your dreams regularly as well, like kind of immersing yourself in your dream reality, and learning to see the signs and know the difference or not. It all starting to blur, doesn't it, after a while? Kind of the waking mind and the dreaming mind, kind of the doorways get a little bit less apparent.
Well, that's one of the things that I really like doing on the retreats, is trying to introduce things that have happened in people's dreams into our daily activities. And then it sort of creates a feedback system where you start to question whether you're in the dream now or whether you predicted that this thing was going to happen, because it is actually happening. And it creates a conversation between the dreamer and then also the collective, like the group of people. They start to have bits of other people's dreams in their dreams as well. It's really interesting. But I do think there's something to be said. And I think that's another reason why art and writing is so important, is, when I have been lucid dreaming since I was really, really small, I can't remember not lucid dreaming. And I would often see images that I just thought were so amazing, like I'd want to draw them. And one thing that I found is like you say, the more you're sort of vigilant and diligent, the more sure your dream world becomes. And I kind of realized at a certain point, I can't really remember when I realized, but I was in this almost what would you call it, like there was a sort of continuity in the dream place that I would go to. So it was a dream universe that I visited. It was like an other world, but it was all consistent. It was like my other world, and I still go to that place now as well. But I do think that drawing the images that you see in your dreams is like working some kind of magic. It's like bringing the dream image into the real world, opens up that path of communication and that conversation between the subconscious part of yourself and the conscious part of yourself.
And it's a very kind of right-brained activity, isn't it? You're working with the symbolic and the less linguistic too, which I think is where the concepts and experiences from the dreaming world most adhere. But yeah, I love the idea of painting your dreams.
Mm.
It's a good habit to get into.
Um, I wanted to ask you a question actually, because one of the theories I've got is that it's really important when you write your dreams down that you don't record them on a phone or a voice note. You like physically write them down with pen on paper. And I really think there must be whatever the part of the brain is involved in writing, like the fine motor skills of writing and the way your brain works when you write words down rather than tap them into a phone is different and engages different brain regions than, because there's something so kind of mindless and disconnected from tapping numbers and letters into a phone in comparison with making the forms of every single letter and creating every single word. Like you're writing that word into reality. When you're tapping it, it's all the same action. It's just beep, 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 beep. And it's not like individual, I think there's something completely different about it. And I'm convinced that when you do that recording of a dream, it has a totally different effect on how you remember dreaming, and it's much, much better.
That'd be interesting to study. I mean, certainly for me, I wouldn't like to do the kind of just pressing keys because I also like my dream diaries are full of doodles of the objects and things, and you're trying to capture them, which I don't think you could do easily on a tablet or phone, right? So, um, but I do like that notion, and I have no idea about that, but I think it's worth exploring. I guess it maybe it's a generational thing as well. I'm not saying too much about you or I here, but younger people may be just more at home and more familiar and happier to use that modality, right? Of just keys and but it doesn't work for me.
That
One
might
thing I
be.
will say is you have to be really careful when you're writing your dreams down. If you're not very practiced, many a time I've woken up and in the morning and had a dream in the middle of the night and I'd written it all on one line, like a kind of palimpsest, just to kind of had to try and decipher it, like look at it from a different angle. But
Do you think that, say, if, because one interesting thing about lucid dreaming is you don't forget it, or you tend to not forget it. It's like it's there recorded because areas of your brain that are involved in memory are active when you're lucid dreaming. But if it's a dream that could vanish, just the act of writing it down, even if you don't remember it when you look back at it, still seems to have an effect on how good your recall is of it. I think it's a bit like, I think saying out loud is the same. If you say it out loud, it's like you've committed it to ordinary memory then, and it's more likely to be easy to remember it. But I do think the writing thing is something we can definitely do experiments with on the Oracle Dream Retreat, because I think darkness and sensory deprivation when it comes to dreams is probably like, well, it's kind of boring, but it's the one of the easiest routes to lucid dreaming and vivid dreaming is just sensory deprivation, I think. Because I guess like a lot of dreaming, of fantastic dreaming, can be compensatory. So if, I mean, I had a lot of fantastic dreams as a kid growing up in Croydon, and I think it's because Croydon was so boring. I was like trying to escape it all the time in my dreams at night.
yeah, I mean, it's probably a similar principle with flotation tanks and my limited experiences in those, like the kind of hypnagogic journeys you go on are really kind of quite illuminating, relative to just a normal dream, I guess. But so, yeah, I like that idea of a kind of like sensory or kind of informational rebound from like how turgid is the place you're in compared to, where you can go in a dream potentially.
Mm. So tell me about some of the dream experiments or studies that have happened so far with regards to precognitive dreaming, because I don't actually know that much about previous studies. So it'd be interesting, like if there are particular studies that you're interested in and kind of further interested in further developing, or something that you're basing it on, or is it something totally new?
So the first study is going to be just a kind of basic replication of my previous work, but with lucid dreamers and non-lucid dreamers. So comparing lucid dreamers to non, and also looking at, how vivid their dreams were, whether or not they were lucid, psychological factors as well. So like kind of constructs like absorption, um, lability, stuff like that, really, kind of sleep, hygiene, just like the motivations. So we're going to look at a whole bunch of kind of psychological variables, which we think may predict or be contributory to dream recall and therefore dream intentions and dream precognition. But the previous studies, like, I mean, most of this work started in the kind of 60s and 70s with Stan Krippner. Bless his socks, is still going now in his 90s. He's not conducting much research, but he does occasionally pop up, and he's still writing stuff and publishing. At the Maimonides Dream Research Lab, sleep lab in New York, and they conducted dozens of dream studies, dream ESP studies, primarily clairvoyance and telepathy, mostly over the course of like about 15 years. But they had a kind of dedicated lab, and it was about the same time that they just kind of worked out that REM sleep is a thing and that you can monitor it with kind of EEG and EOG. And if you wake somebody up during REM, chances are they're more likely to be having a vivid part of their dream, or it's like a different kind of quality of dreaming. So they would literally wake people up in the sleep lab when they're in REM state, having somebody else in another room kind of telepathically transmitting a kind of a target to them. And those experiments were pretty successful, but obviously quite labor intensive and expensive. And since that time, most people have adopted to do home dreaming experiments, which have been less successful, but still, overall better than chance. So people sleep at home, and then they either usually come into the lab in the morning, or they would submit later on. More recently, people just submit their dreams online, and then do a judging process. And that's the protocol I've been using. So it's more cost effective. You don't have to drag anybody into your lab, and people get to sleep in the comfort of their own bed, or whoever's bed they happen to sleep in. And the you can actually, so you can have bigger dream studies. So a lot of those studies are slow and labor intensive, and as a consequence have quite small sample sizes. So I actually conducted two of the biggest dream ESP controlled experiments about a decade ago. We had something like 400 trials in one of those studies. Um, and the effects weren't as robust or as strong as the original sleep lab studies, but they were still, useful. And with bigger participant pool and bigger trials, you can discern more things about individual differences that people have, that factors that may affect their ability to dream precognitively. So that's where I'm going with it.
So tell me about the video clip thing again, how that's going to work.
So basically, you have your dream mentation, which is recorded, written down, preferably, maybe sketched too. And using that, you then will see after the dream, something spooky happening, you'll watch 4 1-minute video clips. And at this point, nobody knows what the target is. It hasn't been selected. And then you match your dream to these 4 video clips and you rate them relatively, on a scale of 1 to 100. Okay, so this one's 90, this one's 10. So it's a little bit like, that scene from The Matrix, a smattering of Mary Poppins, maybe, a little bit of Rick and Morty, but nothing like The Big Lebowski, right? So like something like that. And then we use a random, once the selection's been made, but you run a random number generator to select the target. So it's completely independent, it's completely abstract, and all things being equal, that should just be a kind of 1 in 4 chance probability, right? So we know the exact probability at which you should dream this target, and that's 25%. In those studies we've run, we find figures higher than 25%, and the more trials you have, the more significant it gets. So that's the basic idea. Does that
Mm.
make sense?
Yeah, yeah. So we can do something similar on the retreat, maybe not with videos, but with some other image. We can get like
What's
I
your
don't know,
aversion to videos?
a tortoise to choose a photo or something. In Istanbul, there's a rabbit fortune teller. There's a man who has two rabbits in a trolley, and there's these little fortunes with little rolled up bits of paper, and he holds the rabbit, and the rabbit chooses your fortune for you. I think it's quite an old tradition. We could do something like that, maybe.
That's really cute.
Well, I don't know if the rabbits particularly enjoy it. Maybe they do, but
Well, it's better than most of those kind of animal involving kind of mantic practices. Usually we kind of involves eviscerating the animal and reading
yeah.
their entrails. So that's, that's a kind of nicer version, I think. Kid friendly.
Kid
Mantic
friend.
art.
Um, I was thinking about how language informs our idea about how we can predict the future as well. Like I'm really interested in hieroglyphic scripts, especially ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. And I think there's something of a pictographic script that makes more sense of precognition because the world speaks to you through the items and things in the world. So you're looking about the world and there can be a configuration of real things that spells a word and it's like God's talking directly to you. So I think language obviously affects consciousness quite a lot and then also plays into divination and games seem to be very closely related actually. So one of the things we do a lot on the retreats is playing games, and the more childish and ridiculous the games are as well, because you mentioned how there are certain psychological markers for quality of dreams. And one thing that I really associate with lucid dreaming is being ecstatically happy. And when I'm ecstatically happy, I have much more vivid, amazing dreams. And I think there is something about whatever that makeup is of being ecstatically happy and feeling like your life is a dream anyway, that creates this much better foundation for lucid dreaming. So is that something that you find in dream research, that psychological condition? Because I know depression often weakens dreaming ability, and I've talked to many people who smoke weed because they want to suppress their dreams because they have nightmares. So what's
Yeah,
your thoughts on that?
yeah, definitely cannabis. I mean, that's one of our few exclusion criteria to this study is you can't be a cannabis user, or at least a regular one, because it pretty much annihilates dream recall specifically, as aside from other drugs. Um, but the other stuff about kind of your kind of state, yeah, I think there probably is something about state dependent memory. Like if you are feeling more joyous and happy, then you're probably more likely to have joyous and happy ecstatic dreams, and therefore probably better able to recall them because you're maybe less likely to suppress them. I mean, nightmares can be extremely vivid, right? But yeah, I think there's something to it. I think of all the kind of ecstatic states I've had, I often have vivid dreams afterwards. And they're my kind of favorite ones as well, of course. So I can only really speak about it kind of on a personal level. I haven't looked at the research on that, but it's worth peeking at, I think.
Mm. So I think the more activities we can do on our dream retreat to encourage ecstasy, the better. That obviously don't involve cannabis or any dream suppressing.
Or actual ecstasy, like that for that matter, because that would, get us in trouble.
Awake.
Sorry?
Ecstasy just keeps you awake.
There is that. And I often hear actually, I've heard quite a few reports of people getting terrible sleep paralysis after ecstasy use,
Mm.
probably on account of the kind of like a sleep deprivation as much as anything, rather than the actual drug. But there you go.
Yeah, sleep paralysis. I've only had one episode that wasn't really like classic sleep paralysis. It was more I couldn't wake up out of a dream. Like I was in the dream, I was jumping in this garden and I was jumping with joy. I was like super ecstatic. But then after I'd like jumped into the air, suddenly everything underneath me just turned into pure black and I was like falling into this abyss and it was terrifying. And I tried to wake myself up, but I couldn't. It was like I was a ghost inside my solid body on the bed and I kept trying to click back into position, but I couldn't do it. So it wasn't really like sleep paralysis. It was something different. But I'm interested in your thoughts on sleep paralysis, actually, because I do have a lot of people that come on the retreats. And with sleep paralysis, often people are really scared. And the more scared you are, the heavier and the more intense the feeling of being held down, and that weight on your body seems to become. And I liken it to nightmares, because I think if you have a nightmare and you're really terrified of something, the terror that you have is reflected in the outside dream world, and it just becomes more and more oppressive. So tell me about the scientific dimensions of sleep paralysis.
Yeah, so I mean there are some kind of psychophysiological like basis to it. Now that doesn't necessarily mean it explains all of the phenomena, but it certainly kind of underpins some of the mechanisms as to how it occurs, like biologically speaking. And part of that is, the mechanism that switches off your volition over your own body when you go to sleep to stop you acting out dreams. Now, if that doesn't function properly, you end up doing somnambulalism. You're just kind of moving around your room and doing all kinds of crazy things. And occasionally, that has led to people being murdered as well, or at least it's used as the defense in many cases. So, that's what the body has, this ability to switch off your connection to your body, apart from the movement of your eyes and, of course, your autonomic systems, so like breathing and stuff like that. And so what tends to happen is, like, in this hypnagogic zone between waking and sleeping, where sleep paralysis occurs, that mechanism doesn't kick in quite properly. So your consciousness is kind of slipped into a sleep dream state, but the body, no, the other way around. So your body is slipped into a kind of dream state, but you are kind of consciously aware, like you're awake. So it's the opposite of sleepwalking in a way. And now what then happens is people get, like, often with a sense presence, which in and of itself is kind of quite scary. But then that kind of has this kind of feedback loop, in that if you sense a presence in the room and you don't think you're asleep and dreaming, your immediate response is one of fear, which then leads you to kind of, inhale, but you have no control over your lungs because your body is paralyzed. And then you have this sense in which, oh shit, I can't actually breathe. Something's crushing my chest, which makes you more scared, which makes you more panicky. And then you end up in this kind of like negative feedback loop of like ever increasing fear. So like, the only real way out of it is kind of like surrender. And that's what people tend to report as a good get out to sleep paralysis. Often people have out of body experiences as well, which can be useful in dissociating from the terror. But I think once people kind of break through the barrier and realize that they can abort a sleep paralysis experience through just kind of surrendering to it, that tends to make it easier to abort the sleep paralysis. But when you're caught in the fear loop,
Yeah.
it's pretty scary.
One of the things I read about sleep paralysis is you can actually make very tiny micro movements of your fingertips as well. And obviously you can make those movements of your eyelids. And one thing that people try to do is make big movements to get out of sleep paralysis. And that's kind of the worst thing you can do, because you can't actually make big movements. So then you get more panicky. So it reminds me of, Engelbert Winkler, who invented the Lucia number 3, he was telling me that his like go-to method for lucid dreaming is pretending he's got sleep paralysis until he ends up in a lucid dream, which is actually really, really good advice if you're not going to get scared. But like you say, if that shutting down the body is a kind of just faulty system, then it's a bit more terrifying. If you're consciously entering into a sleep paralysis thing, you're entering into it willingly. I think it's kind of how I used to enter lucid dreams a lot as a kid, actually, kind of pretending to have just like lying down on my back, waiting to go into a dream. But one of the things that reminds me of is I know this sleep scientist called Daniel Oldis. Do you know Daniel Oldis? He was working in labs in the States, and he was doing these studies using electromyography, where he was recording the micro movements of the voice box. And I had this brilliant conversation with him years ago, because I had a dream about making a whole film that was about the science of deep sleep, but it was like a fictional story, and it was called A New Science of Deep Sleep. And I looked up some of the stuff when I woke up in the morning, and I saw this guy called Daniel Oldis, and I messaged him and I told him about my dream, and he started telling me about this electromyography work that he was doing. And basically it's to do with dream recording and how you can have communication from a dreamer and a waking participant, communicating with them while they're in a dream. But it was actually like, as is often the case, like a sort of covert military study to see if they could get subvocal commands, a way of communicating subvocal commands between units. Anyway, they're recording these micro movements, and they're really, really tiny. And I think in their study group, they didn't have lucid dreamers, they just had regular dreamers. But I said to him, if you had a lucid dreamer, when they're in the dream, they could vocalize a bit more dramatically, and maybe you could get better recordings of like the shape that the voice box is making. And so that night I had a lucid dream, and I was remembering our conversation. And so I was trying to like really enunciate every single word to see like, you know, how I could feel it in my voice box. And it occurred to me in the dream that, you know, when we're in a nightmare and we're screaming or we're running away, that panic that you have when you can't run fast enough is actually a reflection of the tiny, tiny little movements you're making, because those incredibly subtle sensations are massively amplified in the dream space. And when we make a tiny little like noise in the dream, we're like screaming at the top of our lungs, but it's just not coming out because we don't have that control over our body. So I think that my advice has been to people who come to me with sleep paralysis is try to make really tiny little subtle movements, and it tends to relax you if you're having a dream paralysis episode. But rather than trying to have really big dramatic movements, just the tiny little ones are actually better. I've had an experience of making, when I'm asleep, of making tiny little micro movements of my fingertips, and as I do, it was forming these kind of like snowflake geometric patterns that was really nice. And it sort of, you know, it was much more dramatic and vivid, those tiny movements in the dream space, than it would have been in reality.
Nice. I've got a question. Did they manage to record through the micro movements of the voice box? Sorry, any go away. Not you. Are you still there? Hey, sorry about
Yeah,
that. Did
right.
you did they manage to
I
record
don't know what the
voices?
more yeah, I don't know what the more recent ones are, but yeah, that was the idea, is that they could basically identify the words that someone was saying in a dream, so you could record a conversation, for example. But I
That's good
don't
to know.
like where he is with it at the moment. But I should I'll get in contact with him again and find out, because it would be very interesting.
I'd like to get hold of that because I probably really wind my girlfriend up in that. I've developed this thing relatively recently of like being in this kind of half sleep awake state, hypnagogic, and I'm trying to talk about my dream content, and I end up just going, this is in a really annoying way. Just like, and I can hear myself doing it, but I'm kind of off somewhere over here, and I'm like, damn, it's really hard talking. And yeah, so it's just that must be really annoying for anyone. Don't you?
Weird, because I think the intelligibility of words is a really interesting phenomena of those altered states, because sometimes I do yoga nidra and I listen to a recording and I'll get into a certain kind of trance state, and I can hear the blah, 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 blah sound of her voice, but it's turning into completely different language, into like a dream conversation. So I think that's quite interesting how, I guess there's an oracular aspect to that as well. Like people used to listen to murmuring streams and hear the voices in it, or listening to the wind in trees and hear voices and oracles in it. The future, I think, like people are going to realize that they aren't dreaming as much and want to get it back. And I also think that we're going to have like a bit of an analog renaissance. I think that people are going to get so bored of AI and switch off. And
so much. I already am. I'm there already. I think, and then once it takes all the jobs, the only thing, like, it'd be like people would just go back to sitting around fire and storytelling and making music and getting into dreams.
I'm really into traditional crafts as well. I think there's going to be like a massive upswing in uptakes on traditional crafts, because ultimately an AI can never replace like craftsmanship. It just can't do that. Like there's these amazing schools for traditional crafts, and I've been watching this guy who makes all of his own pigments and stuff, and the way he talks about natural pigments and the colors of nature as this divine act is absolutely amazing. It's really inspiring. So yeah, I think that that's what we're going to see, or at least to some sort of split where half of us are like Cyberdog and the rest of us And
And some of us are a bit of both, you know, but to kind of bring in the cash. But yeah,
all right,
I'm really looking forward to you. So I see you like next Friday, yeah? Next Friday?
perfect.
Week
Yeah.
after. No, next Friday. Wow, amazing. I
All right.
love that. Where will I find you? I'll just give you a shout, shall I?
Now, or just wander aimlessly around until you find us.
Okay, I know where you'll be.
All right. See you later.
Lucy, Sarah, take care. Bye bye.